Hello and welcome to You're Booked. I'm Daisy Buchanan, the incorrigibly nosy, inky-fingered scourge of your local library. Before I introduce this week's brilliant guest, Lauren Bravo, here's a friendly reminder that my new book, The Sisterhood, a beautifully written delight according to Nina Stibbe, is out on the 7th of March. Your Booked listeners can pre-order it from themargatebookshop.com and get 20% off with a special code BOOKED. If you want to support independent bookshops and this podcast, this is a great way to do it. Now to our guest. Lauren Bravo is the author of What Would the Spice Girls Do?, a tender, funny, smart and joyous celebration of girlhood, fan culture and being a child of the 90s. She is a prolific journalist, writing warmly, wittily and regularly for absolutely everyone, including The Pool, The Guardian, Cosmopolitan and The Worthing Herald. Lauren is also one of my very best friends. Her little brother set us up on Twitter with the words, "Hey, this girl sounds exactly like you," after I tweeted about choosing a bridesmaid's dress in under 20 minutes in order to crack on with some Bloody Marys. Lauren and I met in our 20s, but we're lifelong spiritual twins, sharing exactly the same views on custard, Amy Winehouse and reading material. Here's what I found on her shelves. So, Lauren Bravo, I'm looking in your beautiful brand new house at your beautiful bookshelves. The first thing I noticed are 3 books that belong to me.
I know, but do you notice how I put them out in a little pile so I can give them back to you?
We should perhaps say for the record, these are Oh My God, What a Complete Ashling. Also Nora Ephron, who does come up quite a lot, and we've just been talking about, and Lush by Gabrielle Fernie, a memoir that I really loved. It was great fun.
Loved it. I read that on a plane to Estonia and back. And yeah, it's just gleeful. What have I left in it?
I opened it. You have cards from the Nordic Hotel Forum and I think this is your bank statement.
And my bank statement. I'm so sorry. Do you know I left them in there as a little treat, so you can trace that book's journey.
Pretty strong.
Oh God, this is going to be where you ask me about my habits about abusing books, because I'm really bad for that.
I mean, I think using them as records to your financial affairs. Are you a scribbler and a bender and a foxer?
Yes, I'm not so much of a scribbler unless I have a reason to, if I'm writing about it, reviewing it or something. I'm very much a corner bender. Is
that so you can come back to things that have captured your imagination?
Yeah, that, and also I just never have a bookmark on me. And because I read very much in dribs and drabs, so I'll snatch a page here and there on the tube and then turn the corner over. And I always forget that I'm reading a book I borrowed off somebody else and then I do it. So yeah, no, I'm awful for that. Sorry.
So what do you read when you travel? Do you read in the morning? Do you read? Is reading a part of your day?
Not as much as I would like it to be. I read when I travel, and as a freelancer, obviously that's a bit erratic. So some days I don't travel. I try and read before bed, but what inevitably happens is I fall asleep and the book lands on my face. So yeah,
Your face is the ultimate bookmark.
Yes, if you find some of the pages are drool marked, apologies. No, I mean, I absolutely live for really long train journeys. That's the thing that gets me so excited. So this weekend we're going up to Edinburgh, and knowing that I have an uninterrupted 4.5 hours to read is just bliss, because I don't get that very often. What do I have? I've got Educated by Tara Westover, which I bought today.
I really want to read it.
I bought that today. I was meant to be Christmas shopping, and I picked it up thinking, well, someone will want this, and then I thought, well, no, it's me that wants that.
Did you get it from a lovely independent bookshop?
I did. I got it from Phlox Books, which is my new local.
Let's give Phlox a plug. I don't know them, but Phlox is Phlox.
Yes.
And it comes with a bookmark.
It comes with a bookmark, exactly. There we go. So they've nipped my dirty habit in the bud. Phlox Books on Francis Road.
There's a story I've heard, and I wish I could remember the writer, and it might be, I might have seen it on Twitter, but someone was on a train, and this must have been some time ago when you could open a train window, but a man was on a train and saw someone reading a book that he had written, and he got very excited. And at one point he laughed, and that was what he wanted to say, oh, that was me, but he held his tongue. Then something happened, sort of 3/4 of the way through apparently, and the reader, his face caved in, and he looked furious, and he made lots of, and he threw it out the window. What was the last thing you read on a train that you wanted to throw out the window?
Oh, God. Do you know what? I mean, this is not the last thing. I'm cheating on this. But I remember trying to read Ulysses when I was at uni. And the worst thing about that was...
Ulysses.
Well, yeah. So I found that when you take Ulysses out in public, it's like it performs some kind of magic trick, and just men everywhere want to talk to you about it. And I just remember being just furious. And I didn't finish it, partly because, I'm lazy and it's Ulysses, but also because I just couldn't take it anymore. Anytime I sat down on the bus or the train, a man from nowhere would pop out and go, "Oh, I see you're reading Ulysses. How are you getting on with that then? Not a light read, is it?" And genuinely, I've never gone back to James Joyce
anything
since.
they say implied that they had actually read Ulysses also, or that, oh, there's a book. There's a man book. It makes me think of, I've been in bars with you where, I ordered you a whiskey. Oh, that's not a drink for girls. Like your whole life's a Yorkie advert.
Exactly the same thing. Exactly the same. It was a magnet for dickheads. And now I'm saying it, I really wish I had finished it and could have dazzled them with my searing critical commentary, but sadly, no.
Do you remember enjoying any of it before the men came?
No. And you know what? I was saying to somebody the other day, I think we were talking about books with lots of piss in them. And I remember saying, "Oh, there's piss in Ulysses." And they went, "Is there?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, I'm sure there is. It's a bit with the kidneys, Yeah, Ulysses, full of piss." And I'm pretty sure that isn't true.
But the thing is, you could say anything about it, couldn't you?
And no one would ever know, and they would just nod and smile. I mean, well, this brings us to my terrible confession, and what is probably going to make me a really unsuitable guest for this podcast is that I have a really bad memory for books. So books that I have read even quite recently, and books that I have loved, I can't tell you what happens in them.
So here, you've got Thomas Hardy, Test the D'Urbervilles. And what do you think about the bit with the dolphin and the the fire that came from the sky?
Where the dolphin sings Happy Birthday.
Yes.
Loved it. So actually, right, Test the D'Urbervilles is a case in point. So I studied that. That's my mother's copy. And lots of my most battered old sort of copies of books were my mother's. My mum is properly a voracious reader in the way that I wish I were.
Is your mum listening, and would she be upset to learn that the cover of Test the D'Urbervilles is no longer friends with the spine?
I'd like to think she would just, she'd approve of that because it shows that it was read. The truth of the matter is that we did it at, I think it was year 9 or year 10 at school, and nobody wanted to read it. And in the end, so the essay was meant to be on the entire book, and then the essay got whittled down to, I think, the first 10 chapters. Then the essay got whittled down to the first chapter, and I think in the end I wrote my essay on the symbolism of everything that happens on the first page. So, and I've never read any more Thomas Hardy. Is that terrible? It probably is, isn't it? I should.
I read Thomas Hardy at A level, and I did not like it. I think it's because as a sort of a lack of levity, and this is very kind of me being a terrible pretentious teenager, and I'm sure loads of people will write and say it's not true, but I felt that he was really quite awful and condescending about the local villagers, and they were there as a kind of Greek oh, how convenient, the poor people are here to teach us about life, and then all the women are punished constantly, which was life, to be fair. It's not, I don't think he was moralising about that. I think he's maybe saying this is how it's, but just get a bit sick of people being stoned, and not in a good way. What do I see here? There's lots and lots of Nancy Mitford. There is. Obviously, I love Nancy Mitford. And next to Nancy Mitford as well is one of the Mapp and Lucias, and all of the rest of them are on my Kindle. I went through a Kindle phase about 6 years ago, maybe. So everything that I read in that era, I don't have a hard copy of. But yeah, I absolutely love Mapp and Lucia. That's always something I recommend to people if they kind of like the Mitfords and want to go further. I think I love reading about snobs and social climbing and manners. Oh, my absolute favourite type of book. Yeah. As you know, you and I are both big fans of Hyacinth. Bouquet or Bucket. And actually, that's so true. And I think Miss Mapp and Lucia were definitely sort of precursors. Proto-Hyacinth. Completely. I've never thought of that. Yeah, it's so true. That is, definitely. I remember once I lent some books to my boss, one of my old jobs, and he took them on holiday and he came back and he said, "Lauren, all of your books are just about posh people getting pissed." And I realised that is my type. Yeah, that's my favourite genre. Did I hear you on a different podcast saying your favourite genre Or am I confusing you with another guest? Is
Poor
the
but
Poor but Posh?
Yeah,
Posh
okay,
but
I did
poor.
say that as well. That is my other favourite subgenre, is poor but posh. But I like reading about posh people, and I don't know what that's about. Oh, social comedies, anything from the sort of middle of the 20th century. Absolutely die for it. But like Barbara Pym, I've got lots of Barbara Pyms up there on that shelf.
Ooh, let me have a reach. So
Yeah, so I've got a few nice 70s versions. Do you want the chair?
Is that Excellent Women?
It's Excellent Women, and all of those very colourful ones are Barbara Pym as well. They're new versions. There you are.
So you mentioned reading your mum's Thomas Hardy. I'm going to see if... Oh God. I'll hold on to the chair.
It was really inconsiderate of me to put my shelves up so high. I think I had a bit of a Beauty and the Beast kind of fantasy going on, and actually it's just really impractical.
I do want to kind of to glide up and down these shelves. So yes, I see you've got it's also quite wedged in. Excellent Women. Is that how you think of yourself? Well, you should be how you think of yourself, actually. You truly are an excellent woman. Do you think it's in these times? This is really weird talking to you from the chair.
I quite like it.
I'm going to sing you a song. It's really, we don't really get permission to laugh at people, but I think we're very, very careful about kindness, which is a really good thing. But reading these books from, I guess, the earlier part of the last century that are fantastically bitchy.
Oh, completely. Oh, it's that very British thing as well of never liking anybody to have ideas above their station. And I think when I say I love books about posh people, quite often it's because it's posh people sort of getting a comeuppance. And there is that slight hierarchy of anybody who has ideas above their station, as with Keeping Up Appearances, I guess. Yeah, but it's a gentle laughing at, isn't it? It's a sort of knowing mockery.
I suppose that's a comedy of manners, isn't it? It's the idea it's so people can see themselves,
yes,
and they're laughing at themselves in quite
their
a
own
safe
foibles. Oh, completely.
way.
I mean, it's that thing that Mr. Bennett says in Pride and Prejudice, isn't it? About we exist to make sport for our neighbours and, you know, laugh at them in our turn. It's that, isn't it? And yeah, I mean, Barbara Pym as well, just...
Strong allusion to pluck.
I know, I'm amazed. I don't know where that came from.
I nearly was like, oh yes, of course, and Mr. Bennett said that. No, that was impressive.
Thank you.
Probably the most lit we've got.
I mean, come on, I say I've got no memory for books. What I do have a memory for is BBC dramas. So let's be honest.
So earlier you said about the Hardys belonged to your mum. How much of an impact she had on what you read?
Oh, massively. So yeah, my mother, she has the best taste in books of anybody I know. Or rather, she has my taste in books, but more discerning. And yeah, so anything that she loves, I will love. And she often lends me books, and she reads far quicker than I do. She gets through a lot more, so I can kind of use her as a bit of a sounding board. And if she says don't bother with something, then I won't. Yeah, and it's funny because both my parents did English at university. But yeah, so I think reading was always a big part of our house growing up, and I think, you know, was so privileged to have that, massively so. Yeah, but I kind of torture myself now actually with how much more my mother seemed to get from that education than I did. So she can still quote great chunks of Chaucer, you know, and she can just roll off quotations from things, and she remembers stuff that she read 30 years ago, and I don't remember things I read 3 months ago. So I've always really envied that in her. Yeah.
Do you think it's because we're products of this awful time where we just have too much in our heads always?
Yeah, I do. I think my attention span is so short. And I don't know, I guess people's brains work in different ways, but I do think that the books that I read when I was in my adolescence have really burned themselves into my brain in a way that nothing else has since.
Were all these books very much books that are in your house that you discovered, or was there anything that you remember reading in secret or in private?
I knew you were going to ask me this, and I was trying to think, like, was there anything really naughty? I mean... Do you know what actually is terrible? And I think I'm probably the only guest you've had that will say this. I've not read Forever by Judy Blume.
Did you sort of know of it? Did you know people who were reading it?
Yeah, because I read everything else that she wrote. And I loved all of them, like starring Sally J. Friedman as herself.
Oh, I love that. But is it after the war? And
yes.
Do they move to Long Island? Or am I thinking of, maybe I won't?
I think they do move to Long Island, I think. And again, I can barely tell you anything that happens in it, but I know I adored it, and I read it over and over again. And Deanie, I remember in Deanie...
Oh, she got scoliosis?
Yeah, and it talks about masturbation in Deanie, and I definitely didn't know what that was. As in, there's a bit.
How old were you?
I don't know, like 11, something like that, 10. And she talks about a special place that feels nice. And I genuinely remember thinking, oh, she must have just like a really smooth bit on her arm. But no, it's weird. I think I must have read books secretly. But also I don't think my reading was censored in the same way TV was. You know, I wasn't allowed to watch Friends when I was sort of 8 or 9 years old, but I probably would have been allowed to read any book.
Are there any books that you've introduced your mum to that she has loved?
That's a good question. I lent her Viv Albertine's To Throw Away Unopened, which is one of the books that I evangelise about all the time at the moment. I think she's read it. I'm not sure. I've asked her, actually.
Because that's so weird, isn't it, when you lend someone a book and they don't mention it and it gets to a point where you feel as though you can't say, so.
Yes. Oh, no. And it's so nerve-wracking. I mean, I have a tendency when I give people presents to apologise for them as they're opening them. You know, I'm really sorry. Actually, it's just a tiny thing. It's a crap thing. Actually, just give it back to me. And I think I do a little bit the same with books as well, because I can't bear the idea of bigging up a book that somebody else then doesn't like. But I love lending books. I mean, as I was unpacking these books the other day to sort of put on the bookshelves, I realised actually all of the books I really love that are my favourites, I don't have because they're gone away somewhere. Do you want me to help you down off that chair?
Thank you so much. I sound like about 1,000 years old. Actually, do I go back? Oh, I'm going back into the Christmas film. Oh, God, there we are. Yeah, because I know we have a lot of conversations about Nils Strackfield.
Yes.
And I don't see her here.
No, oh no, so there is
You
one.
lie, Lauren, you lie.
There is one. Dell, you've got good eyesight. There is Party Frock, which is one, do you know what? I actually still haven't read it, but I found it in this gorgeous little bookshop in Chichester, I think, last Christmas. But yeah, so I have all my mother's old copies of Ballet Shoes and the Bell Family, and they've all got stains on the pages where she used to eat banana sandwiches in bed when she read them.
Your mum or Nils Strackfield? Note to publisher, please include the banana stain.
Wouldn't that be nice if we did that? Yeah, so they are somewhere, but I don't think I've unpacked them. I think they must be in a secret box somewhere.
Are you much of a rereader? Do you have any comfort reads or things that you keep returning to?
Yeah, I mean, they're such cliches, but you know I'm going to say here Bridget Jones's Diary. I probably reread about once a year at least.
See, then all here we have Bridget Jones's Diary.
Yes.
Bridget Jones' The Edge of Reason, Bridget Jones's Baby, and Olivia Jules and the Overactive Imagination.
Which, I wish you hadn't said that, because that copy belongs to Janina Mathewson, and she lent it to me when we had that party when we read Bridget Jones on the anniversary. Was it the 20-year anniversary of Bridget?
So I'm going to try and get this down. Shall we see what Bridget was doing on, not to date this too much, but on the 18th of December?
Oh yeah, let's.
It's quite near the end.
It's not.
Oh, there's no 18th. We have Thursday the 14th and Tuesday the 19th. So we're only one day out.
Okay. Was this when she buys the posh olive oil and then it breaks all over somebody?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, there we go. Got skills.
Do you want to read out her her daily tally?
Oh God. Oh, it's always so bleak, isn't it? 9 stone 7, brackets, but still nearly 1 week to lose half stone before Christmas. Alcohol units 9, poor. Cigarettes 30, calories 4,240. Instants 1, excellent. That's lottery instants, isn't it? Cards sent 0. Cards received 11, but include 2 from Paperboy, 1 from Dustman, 1 from Peugeot Garage, and 1 from Hotel Spent Night in for work 4 years ago. Am unpopular, or maybe everyone's sending cards later this year. I mean, that is searingly relevant because I haven't done any of my Christmas cards. I'm feeling very Bridget about it. Yeah, I mean, this, talking about books that you read in adolescence, so I read Bridget Jones when I was 14, and it was very much tied up in studying Pride and Prejudice at school, and the film of Bridget Jones coming out, and me watching the BBC Pride and Prejudice adaptation for the first time. And that all happened in the space of about 3 months. And I remember just spending the whole time in this hormonal frenzy. I used to print photos of Colin Firth off the internet and keep them in my pencil case and things. And I think out of everything, it was my love of Bridget really that hit me the hardest and has never gone away.
That was an amazing time, wasn't it, when you really had to go and make your totems?
I did. And I used to cut his wife out of them.
I mean, this is something that comes up because I know so many, women like us who love Bridget. And there was something radical about her writing a comedy about a woman living in a very modern way. Do you think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that a book that made you think, oh, you're allowed to write like this. I could do this.
Yeah, definitely. But you know what? I would also say, yeah, actually, no, you're right. Bridget, I remember really vividly thinking that the way that Bridget and her friends spoke was so witty, but also it was kind of the first time I remember thinking, oh, other people find their friends hilarious in the way that I find my friends hilarious, but I'd never really seen it represented on the page. But I think really one of my formative experiences of funny women writers and comic novels about women were books like Jill's Pony Trek, all of the Ruby Ferguson books. And there were so many actually from the 50s. I used to read these ones called Susan at School, Susan Rushes In, Susan's Helping Hand.
Susan Rushes In.
Susan
Sounds
Rushes
really
In.
familiar. I love that name.
And they were about this Scottish girl called Susan who had to go to boarding school with her cousins, and she was always getting into mad scrapes. And but they were hilarious. And I really think, you know, even if I went back now and read them, I would still think they were really, really funny.
I do sometimes think Lucy Mangan, I don't know if you've read her book, Bookworm, A Memoir of Childhood Reading. Really, really loved it. And she says something incredibly savvy about Ruby Ferguson and the pony books, which is they were for girls who would have loved to have had a pony but didn't have them. The real pony girls were out with their horses.
Yeah, completely.
But they were for the kind, you know, that again, it's kind of that posh but poor, posh enough to imagine life with a pony, but too poor to have a pony because they cost £1 billion.
Do you know what? I never had any desire to ride a pony, even. I just loved that, like, that was how funny they were, that I was such a, like, unathletic, towny kid. And yet, yeah, I wanted to go on a pony trek just for the lols.
My sister, Gracie, used to get various like pony magazines, and every week they'd come with a free hoof pick or something. And so just like, does Grace not bother that this isn't something that she could use in her life?
They're just
she's like having the gear.
Just put your hoof picks on your mantelpiece. And
I was thinking about boarding school as well. I think is very, very similar, where I think that I'm sure they're out there. I'm absolutely sure they're out there. I don't know anyone who went to boarding school and loves Mallory Towers. I think they're very much
yes,
because and you have to go to boarding school under a strange set of circumstances, like, you know, you've got a scholarship or your father's going to work in the Gulf,
running away from the circus.
Ever come across the Trebizond books?
No.
They was a sort of modern, I think written in the 90s, Anne Digby, or maybe late 80s. It's Rebecca who is the heroine, and she wasn't a scholarship kid. And what was good about that was, I think often the scholarship girls had to be super, super brainy, and that could be a little bit alienating.
Yeah, that's so
and they're
true.
also, you know, that sort of being a bit shabby and a bit worried. But she was normal enough for a reader to relate, but also she only got there because the firm were paying for it while the family were off in the UAE or whatever.
And then you're allowed to like her. That's the thing, isn't it? Yeah, you've got to...
And it got very sexy. Someone had a Swedish cousin called Ingrid who had boyfriends and was topless sunbathing on the beach and always being told off. And she's like, it's the natural way. I think I definitely had moments of stirrings that I couldn't quite put my finger on.
Interesting.
Until I read Deanie.
We'll be back with Lauren shortly, but now it's time for my Steal of the Week, a book I loved so much that paying the cover price alone seems like an act of daylight robbery. This week, my steal is She is Fierce, brave, bold and beautiful poems by women, edited and compiled by Anna Sampson. This gorgeous anthology features poems by women whose work I love, like Maya Angelou and Dorothy Parker, and work by poets whose work I've been thrilled to encounter for the first time, like Nikita Gill and Imitiaz Darka. The poems are grouped together according to theme, and the selection really is smart and harmonious. This is a great book to have beside the bed, so you can start and end your day with a poem. And often I start reading one when I'm exhausted, only to discover an hour has passed and I'm 20 poems deep. It's a book to treasure and revisit often. That's She is Fierce by Anna Sampson, published by Pan Macmillan. Now back to Lauren.
And so you've also got one of my very favourite writers, a write by Helen Fielding. Oh, I think I've got a splint up. You have Nina Stibbe.
I do. Oh, God, I love her.
Guest who we've recorded with.
Yeah, I'm eagerly awaiting it. Yeah, so I read Love Nina. Do you know what? Shamefully, I don't think I read it until after the TV show had come out.
Oh, really? Did you read it first, or did you read the novels first?
I read Man at the Helm first.
Me too.
Yeah, which I just loved.
How did that come into your life?
Do you know what? It has such a beautiful cover. Shamelessly, I kept seeing it in bookshops a few years ago.
Is this the jam tart one?
That's the jam tart one, yeah. And I'm a complete sucker for a beautiful cover. And I think I'm normally quite good as well
It's wedged.
Oh, I'm sorry,
We
I
know
have
it.
packed
It's
my
yellow
bookcase
gingham with jam
so
tarts.
tightly. Yeah, and then I read Paradise Lodge. I read that on holiday last summer in Scotland. We had a very cold, very rainy August holiday in Scotland, and we were holed up in a cottage, and I read the whole of Paradise Lodge in a day, I think. And yeah, she's so good. She's got a sense of humour that reminds me, I think, of my mum and my family. Because there's nothing worse, is there, than reading a book that everybody says is hilarious and you maybe sort of chuckle quietly twice. You know, and you get so many of those books, I think particularly, I don't want to generalise, but often comic books written by men, will always have kind of very sweeping cover quotes that say, I laughed until I cried, I laughed until I ached. And I
was hospitalised, such is the power of this book.
And I will, and I'll read them and I will sort of, smile slightly once on the bus, and that's it. And I always felt like I was kind of missing a trick with those books. So there's just something so delightful about reading a book that is funny in the exact way that the people you love are funny.
Yeah. And I think it's very weird and dark and human, isn't it? I think it's interesting because that book was packaged as a lovely, light, Alan Bennett round for tea, we more obviously love Nina than Man at the Helm. And it's just about the tragedy, really, of how families come together when they're coming apart. And I think what I really loved about it was that awful, so when you're a really little kid and you start to learn bits about the adult world and you've got no context for it, and so those things seem so much scarier and so much harder to bear out of context.
Yeah, completely. Well, things like your parents talking about money around you. I always found that absolutely terrifying when I was a kid, to think that my parents were struggling or a bit hard up.
Because of the books that we read, because you're like, we're going to the workhouse. Darling, there hadn't been workhouses in the country for 100 years. Go to the workhouse!
Oh my God, you're probably right. No, completely, yeah. And it is those little glimpses of adult knowledge without any context are terrifying. Yeah.
I suppose that's what going back to Nancy Mitford as well, in that weird war period where you're kept a child for so long and then suddenly you're terrifyingly adult.
That's it. No, completely. Whereas, these days we are, what are we, teenagers till we're 25 now?
So they
32, 46.
I see you've got Elena Ferrante.
Yes.
Everybody is, everyone I'm friends with loves. They have to.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about concealing your identity or writing things anonymously?
Do you know, it's funny. I've definitely said this a few times recently, because I wrote a book this year that came out a couple of months ago, and because I got kind of projected quite quickly into the world of promoing a book this year, and I have definitely had moments where I've gone, God, I wish I could just do an Elena Ferrante and not have to do any of this, because it's a weird sort of thing that people don't really prepare you for. Like, that writing the book is going to be hard, but the trying to sell it afterwards, and in our modern age of social media and things, and feeling that it all kind of rests on your shoulders and you've got to kind of really be this perfect author figure and say all the right things afterwards.
It did make me think a lot about how miraculous it is that we read what we read and that we find books, because feeling as though you need to go out and find your readers, and if you don't, it's somehow all your fault.
That's it. Personally puts it into each person's hands.
Nell Stratfield hasn't been around our house, please.
No. But no, I loved the Elena Ferrantes, and I kind of, do you know what? I have a bit of I guess you're going to say it's imposter syndrome, but also sometimes I think it's quite valid. But I do often read books that I feel I'm not quite clever enough for. And Elena Ferrante, I had that gorgeous thing of them being right on the cusp for me. So I felt challenged by them. And I really felt like I was being forced to think quite a lot, which, if I'm really honest, that's not my natural inclination when it comes to books. Like, if someone says to you, oh yeah, you'll love this, it's so complex and meaty and interesting and you'll cry at the end, I'm just not going to pick it up. So I'm really glad that I read all of those, and I don't ask me what happened in them, because again, I would get as far as Naples.
I think
there was a doll.
So, as the setting, and she's sort of having different relationships throughout, and I think that first one is so striking, and I think again because it is about their childhood, and I think it stays with you in the way that their friendship becomes less intense and sort of, I think intense in their heads, but it becomes a lot more fragmented.
Yeah.
Maybe our relationships with them do as well, and it's not that immediate kind of...
I think that's it, and I think there's something to be said for books where it's okay if you are not 100% with it the entire way through, if that makes sense. And I think because they are such dense books, and, I definitely remember there being passages where I was completely consumed by it and thinking, God, this is so beautiful, and I completely identify. And then other passages where I was a bit lost and a little bit bored. And I think that's kind of okay. If you're going to write an enormous 4-volume saga, that's sort of to be expected, isn't it? But I think I'm only just now in my 30s kind of giving myself permission almost to have that kind of response to books.
Do you think in the way, because I know you've talked a lot and we've had conversations and you've written about this and spoken about that sense of you being an author, capital A's all round, of like how you'll live and look and be. Do you feel like that as an adult reader as well, that you believed there'd be a point of, I don't know, being the sort of person who would just, I'm reading Dickens for the 5th time for fun.
Yes,
and
yeah.
almost waiting for that shift to happen without maybe doing anything to make the shift happen.
I think that's it. And
Describe myself there.
Yeah, no, it's so true. Do you know what? It's funny you should say Dickens as well, because today I have had a bit of Twitter drams. I tweeted something really silly yesterday about making a reference to A Christmas Carol.
About putting your dick in?
Oh, well, now I feel better. I love you. No, it was about, I made a reference to A Christmas Carol in an article that I was writing, and then later realised that the reference I had made was not to A Christmas Carol, it was to A Muppet Christmas Carol. And it was about, I wrote, it was a reference to Marley and Marley. And I, a day later went back and gone, oh God, of course, there's only one Marley. And I tweeted that, and then it got picked up for one of those Twitter moments that are really unhelpful.
How did I
Twitter,
miss this?
thank you very much, Twitter, but actually, if you could just not do that, because what happens then is that all of the sort of Jeremys and Bryans of the world crawl out, and so all afternoon I've had people going, I just don't understand how you could make this mistake. There have been countless adaptations of Dickens, and does nobody read books anymore?
There have been countless adaptations of Dickens, and they all blur into one big bonnety pile of whatever, and then you've got the magnificent Muppets who will have our hearts and minds as long as they shall live.
Yeah, and I have no shame in saying that I think some of the stories I love the most and the ones that have really stayed with me are the ones that have been adapted. I mean,
you've realised as well, you caught it. It's not as if, the editor was like,
Yes, it wasn't printed, thank you. But no, it's funny. So Dickens, I have only read one Dickens, and that's Bleak House.
Bleak
the
House
hardest one.
Pretty hardcore.
I know, right?
Because the Christmas Carol is short.
Exactly. So I had to read Bleak House in my first year of uni, and my tutor, she said, how are you getting on with it? And I said, oh. And she said, I've only read Bleak House as well. You don't need to read any more Dickens. And it was just joyous. It was like she'd just given me a puppy. I was like, really? Really? She said, yeah, if you don't like Dickens, you don't need to read any more of it. And that was revelatory. But I think I do hold, generally, I have a bit of a complex about maybe having wasted my university education. And particularly this week when I was putting all these books on the shelves in our new flat, and I was putting all the ones that you see on the top there. So all my kind of poetry anthologies and stuff. And then things...
that Norton
the Norton anthology.
Poetry.
Yeah, Good as a Doorstop, or, Pressing Flowers.
I just remember I lost that about 4 times, and they cost about 80 quid.
Oh, they're
or something.
ridiculous, yeah. And then next to that, I've got things like Ovid's Metamorphosis and Aristotle and Darwin. And do you know what's really shameful?
What we need to say as well on this shelf of pride and learning and literature. The last book on the left is Billy Cooper. Is that
deliberate?
Is that Jump?
No, it's Mount.
Mount.
It's
Mount.
I think the most recent one.
As a super fan, I should know the most recent one is Mount.
It's Mount, and I actually put it up there because it's really big and doesn't fit on the other shelves. But yeah, I mean, so all of those books I've not read. I used to buy them 10 minutes before my seminar and take them and sit with them in front of me.
Millionaire.
No, this is the thing. I mean, I was an idiot is what I was, because I didn't go to the library until at least my second year. And I spaffed all of my loan going to Waterstones 10 minutes before my seminars, buying these books, sitting in a seminar, not understanding what was going on because I hadn't read the book. And then they would just go on a pile and I never read them. Yeah, it's bad, isn't it?
Well, I feel?
Why have you still got them?
To look like I'm clever.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Obviously.
Obviously.
Maybe one day, if I like break both my legs or something, then I will just plough through
It's the tricky
Riverside
thing, isn't it?
Chaucer. Yeah.
Don't do that to yourself. You've already got broken legs. No, Chaucer's very good.
I've heard it's bawdy and hilarious. Is that not true?
Well,
There's fanny
spookily,
jokes in Chaucer.
My friend Duncan, he said that in his, I think, charged teenage youth, he saw Julie Cooper on the telly doing something, and he was at that point doing some Chaucer at school and thought that she was the kind of the modern representation of the wife of Bath.
The wife of Bath. Oh, well, there we go. Now I feel validated.
A lot of symmetry
Absolutely.
on that shelf. Are there any books you regret finishing? You're like, I'm never going to get that time back.
That is interesting. I have a bit of a relationship with Barbara Kingsolver. So I'm looking now. I remember loving the Poisonwood Bible. I was really into that. The Lacuna,
Is that the
I
family
think
and the...
Yeah, the family in I can't remember whereabouts in Africa they are. That's terrible.
And they're
isn't
all
it?
missionaries.
They're missionaries, and there's a snake.
And it's kind of a saga of them going off and...
Yes. And I remember enjoying that. The Lacuna, I think I remember struggling with quite a lot.
I really wish they'd ask you for a cover quote. There's a snake. Brother.
I remember there's a snake in it.
You could have done one for the little friend. Lots of snakes, but possibly figment of crystal meth imagination.
Do you know what I do regret actually more is there are lots of books that I have abandoned halfway through, not because I wasn't enjoying them, but just because my head was turned by something that looked a little bit more fun, and then I've not gone back to them. So that's quite bad. So Crudo by Olivia Lang, I need to go back to that because I was reading that and I was kind of very enthralled by it. I hadn't made up my mind as to whether I'd loved it or not. Oh no, you've just got it out. How much have I read of that? Not very much. You can see where I folded around the end papers. Okay,
it looks quite doable.
It is very slim. Oh, it is. Yeah. But something else crossed my path, and I think it might have been. Oh my God, what a complete ashling actually. And I just knew I wanted to read that first. So that is a terrible tendency I have.
I often read. I'm reading a few different things at the same time, and I think it's kind of like, it's a bit like Perth. God, I'm so spoiled and awful. I should just read one book and stick to it. But the sort of I have moments where if I'm reading something really bleak, I'm like, I just need a bit of P.G. Wodehouse right now.
Oh, completely. I think books for different moods is a really legitimate way of doing it because that's how you do TV, isn't it? You know, you wouldn't want to sit down and watch The Handmaid's Tale every single night. Sometimes you just want Parks and Rec or something. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that's fine, but I do kind of regret abandoning a few things.
Do you think you'll return to them? Do you feel as though maybe I came out of my life for a reason?
Do you know another one I have to go back to is When I Hit You, which is fantastic. You get that one out. So my friend Jo and I have a lovely tradition where every year for like the past, I think 6 or 7 years, we have gone to the Women's Prize for Fiction readings, which they do the night before the awards. And it's lovely. And so all of the nominated authors do a reading from their book and then they do some questions and then you buy the books at the end. And Jo and I normally buy most of the books between us and then we share them and swap them around, which as an author now I probably shouldn't be condoning. Buy all your own books.
It's a lot of books.
It's a lot of books.
If you're getting
made of money,
6 books each.
Exactly.
I think you're doing your good work in the book trade.
Well, there we go. Good. So, and this was one of this year's When I Hit You by Meena Kandasamy, and it's absolutely beautiful and it's so poetic and so brilliant. And I'm ashamed to say that I have read about a third of it. And again, I did abandon it for something else, but I will go back to that because I loved that. And actually, it's funny, a lot of the books over the last few years that I have loved the most are books that I bought that night at the Women's Prize for Fiction readings. So Ali Smith up there. Again, I think Ali Smith right on the top there.
I can see How to Be Both and I can see The Accidental.
Yes. So How to Be Both was the one I think that won a couple of years ago. Actually, that was brilliant because Ali Smith, she came to do a seminar when I was at uni. She came to do a seminar as a guest. You know, our lecturer had got her in. It was a great honour and everything. And we were studying The Member of the Wedding by Castle McCullers. It was for a brilliant course that I did called Literary Representation in the History of Homosexuality, which was one of the best things I did at uni. And she got about 5 minutes into the seminar and she was asking us questions and nobody was really being very responsive. I had not read the book, so I was keeping quiet. And after a few minutes, she stopped and she went, right, come on, be honest with me. Hands up, who's actually read this book? And not a single person in the class had read it.
Ooh.
And it was really embarrassing. And I felt terrible about that for a decade afterwards. And so then when I went to that event and she was there and I bought the book and took it up to get it signed afterwards, and I was like, I'm really sorry, you won't remember me, you won't remember this, but I have to just absolve myself. I'm so sorry that none of us read that book. And she did remember. And so the inscription in that book says, to Lauren, I hope you enjoy it, or something like that. Please read The Memory of the Wedding by Castle McCullers from Ali Smith.
That's brilliant. Have you?
No, but I did read her book and I loved that.
I just read, and it's one of those books, again, where I feel a bit ashamed that I hadn't read it before, but I just loved it so, and I'm so glad I did. I just read The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, I think possibly her most famous one.
Yes.
Castle McCullers.
Yeah.
Have you read that?
No.
Well, I mean, I think all these wonderful things are waiting, and it's really, really lovely. I think that our trouble is perhaps, other than we're lazy shits who just want a quick giggle, we are absolutely overwhelmed and saturated, and it is so much, but I think we're under so much pressure to consume and consume and consume. And actually, we should be really, really excited about the fact that we will never, ever, ever run out of
never
books.
get to the end,
it's
yeah.
infinite and thrilling, and there are all these worlds here.
Yes.
What's your Francois Sagan? Is that Bonjour Tristesse?
It is Bonjour Tristesse. I read that.
A teenage.
No, I
impactful
actually read
read?
that this year.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
How does it read now?
I enjoyed it, but I thought it was quite flawed, but I enjoyed it. You know,
I dare say I would extract very different meaning from it now than I did when I was a
yeah, definitely. I think
teenager.
This is it, and I think I read it almost as a gift to my inner pretentious teenager, who does come out a bit every so often. And I think in the way that when I was about 17, I trained myself to drink black coffee because I thought it would make me cool.
But you still do.
But I still do. And you do kind of carry with you, don't you, those little affectations. And so I think reading Bourgeois Tristesse was definitely a kind of a bit of a regression in that. But
I trained myself to drink black coffee because lattes were giving me terrible IBS.
Oh, well, there we go. We all have our reasons, don't we?
I see a lot of Toni Morrison, who she's someone I feel terrible for not reading.
Oh, okay. Now, I love Toni Morrison. So there we go. I can claw back some cred here. I was lucky enough to do Toni Morrison for A-level. I did jazz for my A-levels. And I think there is something, isn't there, when you study a book and you really...
Than a fucking native.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I got very lucky with my A-levels, actually. All the books I did were lovely. And jazz, I just adored it. And it's interesting because I have a bit of a difficult relationship with things like magical realism. I don't love. I really struggle with what's-his-face? Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Books like that I don't adore. But there's something about the way Toni Morrison writes where she has this slight magical thread running through it. So she's writing in the real world, but at the same time there is something a little bit extra. There's an extra layer of something sort of supernatural often going on.
See, I think in the most sort of a very, 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 very minor way, I think you'd be pushed to call it magical realism, but I'm so intolerant of magical realism that I sort of find it in there. Elena Ferrante does that a bit.
Yes, a little bit, and I think it's very hit and miss with me. Sometimes I will hate books that do that. What was another one? Isabella Landé, The House of the Spirits. I remember hating that, but I did read it all. But I remember really resenting the person who made me read it. But every so often I will read a book that has that slight sense of you're reading about the world that is almost our world, but not quite. And so jazz particularly, I think is more in the prose. So the way that she writes it has that beautiful syncopation because it's meant to kind of mimic jazz music, not to sound too much like I'm doing my A-levels again. And the
staccatos reflect
the sibilants and the assonance, lots of fricatives. No, she's fantastic. And so that sort of then sparked an interest in Toni Morrison. I think I did Beloved at uni, but I would kind of go back and reread them all again, and I just think she's a magnificent writer.
You're sort of making me wish there was an A-level for us where we don't have an exam.
Yes.
Like a book group, but with someone really supervising it and really making us...
Yeah, forced to really get under the skin of a book. But that's the thing, because I think you know, and it can be a double-edged sword, because sometimes if you have to pick a book apart, then you end up hating it. But actually, a lot of the books that I can talk about with the most kind of affection are the ones that I was forced to spend an entire term dissecting.
When you think of what goes into any book, especially these novels, it seems absurd to the point of it being a bit insulting that we just read it and be like, oh, that's nice, and then move on. Like, why wouldn't you go back and revisit?
Absolutely.
I subscribe to the theory that any book can be a self-help book if you gain something from it. Are there any self-help books for you in front of me?
Oh, that's such a good question. Do you know
Well,
what?
I do see some actual self-help books. I can see How to Be a Person in the World by
Oh.
Heather Everletsky, who is
Yes.
the Ask Polly advice columnist on The
The
Cut,
Cut.
who I know we're both big fans of.
Yeah, I absolutely adore that. And I tell you another book that that's reminded me of, although I don't know where it is, maybe I've lent it to somebody, is I Was Told There'd Be Cake by Sloane Crosley, which I just love as well. And I think, you know, we are living in a time that is very rich for sort of millennial and 30-something hilarious memoirs, and I love them all, yours the most. But no, so I have read a lot of non-fiction recently, actually, do you know what, H is for Hawk, I found that very therapeutic when I read that one. So that's Helen MacDonald, and it's such an incredibly soothing book, but not in the way that people normally mean, I think, when they talk about soothing books. So it's not remotely light or fluffy. It's a book, it's so evocative of you know, the sort of, she's writing about training this hawk, and there's lots of her getting up at the crack of dawn and going out into the sort of dank February morning.
Teaching it the alphabet.
Bounce balls on its nose. And no, but it's beautiful. She's getting over the death of her father, and her father sort of sparked her love of birds of prey when she was younger. My friend Jo turned me onto that one, actually. And yeah, and I remember reading that and thinking, oh, wow, actually, it forces you to go slow. You know, there's something about the way that she reads it that really forces you to take stock and almost to take breaks, because it is quite heavy going, but in a nice way. So you kind of want to stop and think about what you've read and chew it over a little bit. And yeah, that one is quite therapeutic.
I've got a hypothetical £50 million for you, and a slot on Netflix. You've got to adapt something in front of us for TV. What would you pick? Who would you cast?
Oh, God, that's such a good question. Okay, I'm going to think about this carefully, not just say something stupid. I mean...
And who will play the snake?
Jules Ponytrack. Do you know what? And it's actually not on my shelf, because I think I borrowed it from a friend and then had to give it back many years later reluctantly. Barbara Trapido's The Brother of the More Famous Jack.
Oh, that's so weird, because Caroline O'Donoghue, who we recorded with earlier today...
Did she say that?
She just finished the audiobook. I didn't ask her that question, but it came up.
There we go.
That was it. I asked her which fictional house would she most like to squat in.
Oh
and
my
that's the one
God,
she chose.
yeah. So that is such a delicious book, and actually I think I'm really overdue a reread.
They've definitely not been on telly.
It might have been.
I've never seen it.
I've never seen it
good.
either, but maybe it was done, might have been done in the 80s or something. I bloody love that book. And I've got, so Frankie and Stanky is up there as well, which, again, I don't remember much about it, but I know I liked it.
Is that, for shame I can't remember, is that part of that series of stories, or is that separate?
No, I
is that
think
to do
it's separate. Set in South Africa.
Oh. Because I know I recently read the sequel to Temples of Delight, without knowing it was a sequel. There's another, but then people from Temples of Delight turned up.
And they start popping up.
And it's exactly
I
like
love
when
that.
you're at a party and your best friend who you've not seen in ages. I'm a terrible friend. I have lots of best friends that I've not seen in 5 years. I'm like, oh, it's you! I'm so excited to see you. Like a long lost relative walking through the door.
That is my favourite thing, when authors put little kind of in-jokes and little references in there as prizes for the really attentive fans, little Easter eggs. I love that.
So how would you cast Brother of the More Famous Jack, which regular listeners might know is a story about a North London Jewish family who have a sort of bucolic, idyllic place in Sussex. And you've got Jane, it's the wife. It's not Jacob, is it?
I think it is Jacob Goldman,
yes.
isn't it? Yeah.
Jane and Jacob. And then the two brothers.
I'm not going to be able to remember their names.
And one is sort of a bit more serious and earnest and academic, and one is a bit of a...
Bit of a
Bit of a lad, but
Bit
it
of a
doesn't
goer.
really quite do him justice, does it? But vivacious, and
Yes.
he actually reminds me a little bit of Oswald in the Psammead stories. Is Oswald in the Psammead
Five
stories?
Children in It?
Yeah.
I don't remember Oswald.
No, the Treasure Seekers. Or the Treasure
I haven't
Hunters.
read the Treasure Seekers.
This is just me shouting out like a drunk on a street corner.
I mean, I'm going to do my Psammead impression for you if you're not careful.
Please do.
I mean, it's just constipated. It's just like he's just constipated, and this is entirely based on the CBBC adaptation, of course. Wishing a little harder every day. Anyway, I was very, very big into that. Again, an adaptation.
For the listeners, Lauren
I'm squatting.
Her palms, squatching. She's doing a sort of a slightly hunched squat and doing a kind of. It's as if you're saying H and G in quite a focused. But that's amazing because me and my sisters constantly, we still do Psammead impressions at each other.
Yeah, my brothers
if we want
obsessed
to
with
make something happen for each other, we'll just go. And one of those odd for the listeners, there are lots of things about our relationship where you'll say it and I can't quite believe that it came out of your mouth and not mine.
I like to believe that there was one of us in every county, and one day we will collect the whole set. So you're the Dorset representative and I was Sussex.
I don't know though, because I'm going to be quite pissed off when you're busy mates with the other counties.
I'm sorry.
Who is this?
So I rarely leave London. It'll take a while.
I know you recently married your friends.
I did, yes. Yeah, I had to officiate my best friend's wedding, which was a very honourable occasion, but really terrifying.
And you've written a really beautiful piece about it, which we will put in the show notes.
Thank
but
you.
If you had to give a book as a wedding present, what would it be?
Ooh, that's interesting, isn't it? Do you know what? And this will be a bit of a lolsy answer, but Diary of a Nobody by Georgian Weedon Grossmith.
Ah.
Because there it is, and Dale's found it. There we go. That's a bit of a weird addition, but yeah.
It's slightly kind of like jokey Soviet cover, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't really know what they were thinking with this, but it has got the original illustrations. I think was it Punch? Was it serialized in Punch, or something like that? And it was so this one I reread a lot, and I just think it is so funny. And I made Matt, my boyfriend, read it as a sort of, I'm not going to say as a test, but as a test, let's be honest. Because I knew that, he had to find it funny, and thankfully he did. But I think actually the marriage that's depicted in this is really quite sweet. Not necessarily one you want to aspire to, but could be worse for the time, I'm going to say. And it's just this brilliant comic picture of suburban middle class life and the tiny trivialities of life.
Exactly that. The Map and Lucia, the resenting anybody for trying to be better than they
better
should
than
be.
themselves completely, yeah. And Pooter, Mr. Pooter, who is the protagonist, is just a classic example of one of those kind of ridiculous figures that everybody around is laughing at, and he doesn't realise it.
I often think how this book really is. It's the accusation that is so often levelled at women who write, that it's kind of inconsequential.
Yes.
Very
nothing
nonsense.
happens.
Nothing happens.
There's no war in this. There's no explosions.
I love a book where nothing happens.
Yeah,
I bloody love it.
Basically my brief.
Would you ever write a memoir or a novel or both?
Yes, both. Absolutely. I would love to. So fiction is something that I really, really want to write, but I'm a bit stumped on stories. So I've got lots of ideas for the nothing happens part. So I know, that's the trouble. I know how I would want to sketch characters, and I have lots of ideas for little vignettes and little details and little scenes, and I have lines that I scribble down, but don't ask me what the story is because I have no idea.
And I do think Nothing Happens is a great name for a novel.
There we go. It's the Larry David, Jerry Seinfeld approach to fiction writing. Memoir is interesting. I think I haven't had a particularly interesting life. I mean, I really haven't. Like, you can't argue with that. It's been fine.
Again, it's been fine.
It's
great
been fine.
title.
But I do think there are things that I would like to write about, such as the all-girls school experience. I think is something that if I don't do it, someone's going to do it pretty quickly, because it's so formative. And whenever you talk to other people who went to single-sex schools, and actually I've just remembered Perfect Liars by Rebecca Reed, which comes out in a couple of months, I think. That is a fantastic sort of dark crime mystery thriller. And that is about three best friends who met at boarding school and have been harbouring a dark secret for many years. And I think she perfectly brings out the sort of slightly more sinister side of some of those friendships that you forge. Thankfully, none of mine are like that.
I did.
Legally obliged to say that, but it's true.
I love that book, and I think she's so strong on the the way friendship can be really complicated and toxic
really
and very full of them.
Yes. I would like to write the much more joyful, the much more joyful flip side of that, I think. I mean, also, so Louise Renison was such a formative influence for my friends and I, to the point where literally our WhatsApp group is called Ace Gang, after the girls in the Louise Renison books. And I was furious when they made the film of Angus Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging, or Perfect Snogging as they called it, and they set it in a co-ed school, and that ruined it in my eyes. The whole point was it was meant to be a single-sex school, and it was all about that dynamic. So I would like to write something about that as well. So maybe that's fodder for a memoir, I don't know.
Huge thanks to Lauren, who can be found across social media at Lauren Bravo. Her book, What Would the Spice Girls Do?, published by Bantam Press, is out now. It's a charming, uplifting love letter to female fandom. And if you've ever made a microphone out of something you found in your bathroom, you need to read it. I'm Daisy Buchanan. Thank you so much for joining me, fellow shelf obsessives. You can find me on Twitter at NotRollerGirl and on Instagram at TheDaisyB. Say hello, suggest some guests, and watch out for shelfies. Visit our show page, acast.com/booked, for more information about our guests and a list of the books they talked about. If you have any other queries about the podcast, you can email us at ybooked@gmail.com. That's the letter Y, booked@gmail.com. Your Booked is produced by Dale Shaw for New Alaska and hosted by Acast. Please do subscribe, rate us, and leave a review. It's great to hear what you think, and it helps other people to find the podcast. I'll see you next time for more chat with readers with text appeal.